The day was May 28, 2025. It began like any other in the Swiss canton of Valais. The air was crisp. The sun, however, felt unseasonably strong against the ancient face of Mount XYZ. Below, the village of Blatten rested, seemingly secure in its alpine cradle. Few could have predicted the violence that was about to be unleashed. A deep, guttural groan emanated from the heights. This was not the familiar sigh of shifting snow. This was something far more primal, far more terrifying. The mountain was coming apart. Then came the roar. It was a sound that defied description, a symphony of destruction. Imagine the loudest thunder you have ever heard, amplified 1,000 times, mixed with the grinding of colossal gears and the shattering of 1,000,000 panes of glass. This was the sound of a glacier, a titan of ice and rock, surrendering to gravity in a warming world. For the residents of Blatten, time seemed to stretch and then snap. The familiar stoic peaks they had lived beneath their entire lives were suddenly animated, a terrifying wave of white and gray surging downwards with impossible speed. There was no time to think, only to react or to be consumed. The earth trembled, the air filled with a choking cloud of ice particles and pulverized rock. When the roaring finally subsided, an eerie silence descended. It was a silence heavy with shock and the unknown. The dust began to settle, revealing a scene of almost unimaginable devastation. Where the picturesque village of Blatten once stood, there was now a vast, chaotic wasteland. Over 90% of the village, its homes, its history, its heart lay buried, entombed, crushed beneath an estimated 30 meters of rock, ice, and debris. The vibrant colors of painted chalets, the green of manicured gardens, the familiar lines of streets, all gone, replaced by a monochrome tableau of gray rock and stark white ice, a brutal scar carved into the valley floor. The sheer volume of material that had descended was staggering. Scientists would later estimate that millions of tons of the mountain had come crashing down. The glacier, once a majestic river of ice, had become an agent of burial. The debris field was a chaotic jumble. Massive boulders, some the size of small houses, were strewn about like pebbles. The catastrophic collapse of the glacier on Mount XYZ was not a sudden, inexplicable act of God. It was, scientists quickly determined, a predictable tragedy in an era of accelerating climate change. The primary culprits were unseasonably high temperatures that had plagued the region for weeks, even months, leading up to May 28th. These elevated temperatures relentlessly attacked the glacier, accelerating surface melt. But more insidiously, they penetrated deep into the mountain, thawing the permafrost, the permanently frozen ground that acts like a crucial cement, binding rock and ice together on steep slopes. When this frozen glue melts, the structural integrity of the mountainside is compromised. For weeks, experts had been monitoring Mount XYZ with increasing concern. The mountain was visibly stressed. Chunks of rock and ice had been breaking off the side, accumulating on the glacier below. This growing instability was a clear warning sign. An estimated 9 million tons of debris had already gathered on the glacier's surface before the main, catastrophic failure. This initial accumulation likely added further weight and stress to the already weakened ice mass, a ticking time bomb composed of rock and ancient ice. The glacier itself was becoming a conveyor belt for its own destruction, overloaded and unstable. The science is clear. As global temperatures rise, glaciers shrink and permafrost thaws. Section 4. Whispers from the Wreckage. Tales of Loss and Narrow Escapes. Amidst the overwhelming devastation, the human cost of the Blatten disaster began to emerge, painting a poignant picture of loss and the fragility of life. As of Thursday, May 29th, authorities confirmed that one person, a 64-year-old man, a long-term resident of the village, was missing. Hope dwindled with each passing hour as search and rescue operations, hampered by the unstable terrain and the sheer depth of the debris, continued. Drones buzzed overhead, their cameras scanning the gray wasteland for any sign of life, any flicker of color in the monochrome ruin. For the family of the missing man, an agonizing wait began. A vigil kept against a backdrop of unimaginable destruction. The swiftness of the event meant that for many, survival was a matter of sheer luck, of being in the right place at the terrifyingly right time. 16 people from smaller hamlets downstream of Blatten had to be evacuated as a precautionary measure. The risk of secondary events such as flooding caused by the damming of meltwater rivers by the landslide debris was a very real concern. These evacuees, while safe, carried with them the shock and the haunting images of the mountain's collapse, their homes and communities now threatened by the altered landscape. Their stories are ones of sudden displacement, of lives abruptly put on hold by the raw power of nature. Heroism, too, found its place in the chaos. First responders, including local volunteer firefighters and mountain rescue specialists, were on the scene with remarkable speed, despite the inherent dangers. They navigated treacherous shifting rubble, their every step a risk, driven by the faint hope of finding survivors and the pressing need to secure the area. Section 5. The Vanishing Alps, a Nation's Frozen Tears. The tragedy at Blatten is not an isolated incident, a freak occurrence in an otherwise stable environment. Instead, it is a brutal symptom of a much larger, more insidious crisis unfolding across the Swiss Alps, and indeed in mountainous regions worldwide, the rapid and accelerating disappearance of glaciers. Switzerland, a country whose identity and economy are deeply intertwined with its majestic, ice-clad peaks, is on the front lines of this climatic battle. The statistic that Switzerland lost 10% of its glacier volume in just 2 years, 2022 and 2023, is not merely alarming. It is a catastrophic indicator of profound environmental change. This loss is unprecedented in the history of observation. This dramatic decline in glacial ice has far-reaching consequences beyond the immediate risk of collapses and landslides. Glaciers are vital freshwater reservoirs, feeding major European rivers like the Rhine, Rhone, and Po, especially during dry summer months. As they shrink, water availability for agriculture, industry, hydropower, and drinking water supplies becomes increasingly precarious. The eternal snows are proving to be anything but eternal, and their demise signals a future of potential water scarcity and heightened competition for this essential resource. The picturesque alpine streams could dwindle, and the lush valleys they sustain could face drought. Furthermore, the retreat of glaciers destabilizes mountain slopes on a grand scale. As the ice recedes, it exposes previously supported rock faces, leaving them vulnerable to erosion and collapse, similar to what happened on Mount XYZ. The melting of permafrost, which often exists in and around glaciers, exacerbates this instability. Section 6. Echoes of Disaster, the Looming Threat in a Warming World. The catastrophic landslide that obliterated Blatten serves as a chilling echo, a stark premonition of what the future may hold for countless other mountain communities across the globe as our planet continues to warm. The specific conditions that led to the Mount XYZ disaster, prolonged high temperatures, thawing permafrost, and a retreating glacier, are not unique to this small corner of Valais. They are increasingly common features in alpine regions, from the Himalayas to the Andes, from the Rockies to the Caucasus. The silent, frozen sentinels of our world are awakening, not gently, but with a destructive power that demands our urgent attention. Experts warn that many other glaciers are in similarly precarious states, ticking time bombs waiting for the right combination of environmental triggers. Monitoring systems are in place for some of the most obviously dangerous glaciers, utilizing radar, GPS, and on-site sensors to detect movement and instability. However, the sheer number of glaciers and the vastness of the terrain make comprehensive, real-time monitoring an immense challenge. Furthermore, the pace of change is often outstripping our ability to predict and prepare. The 9 million tons of debris that accumulated on the Mount XYZ glacier before its collapse was a monitored sign, yet the final, devastating failure still wrought havoc. The implications extend far beyond the immediate physical danger of landslides or glacial lake outburst floods. The destabilization of mountain environments threatens critical infrastructure: roads, railways, pipelines, and hydropower dams. It impacts biodiversity, as alpine ecosystems struggle to adapt to rapidly changing conditions. It affects tourism, a vital economic lifeline for many mountain regions, as iconic landscapes are scarred and access routes become more hazardous. Section 7. Beyond the debris, a stark warning etched in ice. The raw, gaping wound where Blatten once thrived is more than just a scene of localized devastation. It is a stark monument to our collective global predicament. The tons of rock and ice that now cover the village are a physical manifestation of a warning that scientists have been issuing for decades. Climate change is not a distant, abstract threat looming on the horizon. It is here, it is now. It is carving its signature into the very fabric of our planet, from the highest mountain peaks to the deepest oceans. The tragedy of Blatten is a headline, but the underlying story is one of systemic, human-induced environmental failure. The immediate response will rightly focus on search and rescue, on supporting the displaced, and on assessing the ongoing risks in the Valais region. But looking beyond the debris, the larger challenge is clear. We must fundamentally re-evaluate our relationship with the natural world and acknowledge the profound consequences of our carbon-intensive lifestyles. The stability of the cryosphere, the frozen parts of our planet, is inextricably linked to the stability of our climate. As we continue to pump greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, we are actively dismantling these critical Earth systems, with devastating results for communities like Blatten. Preventive measures in such high-risk zones are complex and costly.